Hello, dear colleagues. Nice to see you again. Thanks for clicking. And today we are going to talk about teaching reading. We are starting a series of videos on teaching skills, and start on with reading. So, just to brush up, I hope you remember that according to classifications, reading is a visual receptive skill. But there are a few different types of reading, and this is what we are going to start with. Scanning, or reading for detail, or reading for specific information. This is the way we read phone books or timetables in real life. When we read to find certain piece of the text and get the information from there. Next one is skimming, or reading for gist, or reading for general idea. So this is how we read novels or articles, just to get the general impression. Next one is close reading. This is how we read instructions very, very carefully, not to miss any tiny detail. Next is reading to infer textual meaning. In other words, reading between lines. This is how we read poems, or if we are familiar, if you are familiar with CAE format, this is what task 6 requires. When which author has a similar opinion to author B about blah, 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 or which author's opinion on certain topic differs from the other 3 authors' opinions. Next, reading to infer vocabulary meaning. This is how we read articles containing new terms in real life, or this is how we read in class, paying attention to vocabulary. Skimming is a bit similar to referring to textual meaning, but it has a different speed, different pace, and of course, when we infer textual meaning, we need deeper understanding. Then there's another classification, which I hope you are also familiar with, which divides simply in 2 groups, extensive and intensive reading. So, extensive reading is reading long texts, focusing on pleasure and overall meaning. And the main aim of extensive reading is to provide your students with exposure and to make them get the feeling of diving deep into language. To reach this aim, the text needs to have no more than 15% of new vocabulary. That's why I strongly advise you to suggest your students books 1 level lower. For instance, if your student is B2, advise them to read B1 readers. Intensive reading deals with shorter texts and focuses on full understanding, including details, and implies studying the text thoroughly. It's really advisable that your text has 8 to 12 new words. Otherwise, they will just mix up. So now let's move on to reading lesson template first. Yeah. So as you hopefully know, we have 3 stages, yeah, which is pre-reading. Pre-reading includes warm-up activity and pre-teaching blocking vocabulary if necessary. Then, while reading consists of skimming, scanning, and sometimes reading between lines. Yeah? And then we ask our students to give some output. Yeah? So while reading is like input, while they get the information, and then at after reading stage or post reading stage, we get the output from them. So it implies practicing productive skills, either speaking or writing. And then we round up with correction, clarification, and of course, feedback. Yeah? So, some ideas for warm-up activities. Yeah. First, we can just ask a few questions on the topic to activate schemata. Yeah? Simply just say, we are going to read a text about Paris, or better, make the students guess. For instance, show the picture and say, guess, what are we going to read about today? Okay, Paris. What do you know about Paris? Where is it situated? What is it famous for? Etc. Yeah. Next, one of the best ideas for warm-up activities is making up predictions. You can base your predictions on pictures and title, on some keywords. So you like take off a few keywords, put them on board, and ask the students to look at this list and guess the content of the text. Sounds. Students hear some sounds which are connected with the text anyhow, and guess what the text might be about. So, or we can base our predictions on questions and tasks after the text. It's advisable that students first make their predictions individually, then discuss them in pairs and threes, and finally as a class. Then you can cover part of the text and have students predict. So for instance, photocopy the page, yeah, and then use Photoshop or any other familiar program to cover parts of the text. Yeah? The students look at this, at the remaining parts, and try. Then we can copy a text on a separate paper sheet. Yeah? Then you crumple. So this is the sheet with the text. Yeah. Then you crumple it, yeah. Put it on the desk, and your students have to guess the content without touching it, without like uncrumpling. Yeah. Don't allow them to uncrumple. No. They have this crumpled paper, and they may only like move it around in order to guess the content. Yeah? And another idea is to make them ask some questions about this topic. These questions will be used later on when, after reading the text, students will try to answer them. So, keep in mind the most important thing for this warm-up stage is to give your students a reason for listening, like make them want to read this text. Once you've done it, you move on to pre-teaching blocking vocabulary if necessary. And it is necessary only in case if there are over 10 words which are essential for completing the upcoming text and which your students don't know. The next stage is skimming. So, what activities, what kinds of tasks might you suggest for skimming? Match the speculations which you did at warm-up stage with what really happened in the text. Check out whether your speculations were correct. Order the pictures. Choose the best summarizing sentence. Is the author for or against something? Is the author pessimistic or optimistic about something? Order parts of the text. So again, you photocopy the text, you cut this paper into pieces and have your students order the parts. So the focus here is on general understanding. Make your students avoid focusing on details. This is for general understanding only. And this is to develop reading pace. That's why you should give them time limit for skimming. And this time limit should be not too long. Like for instance, say you've got a minute and a half to skim this text, to read through this text quickly and order the pictures. You've got 1 minute to read this text quickly and guess if the author is for or against genetically modified food or whatever. So then you move on to scanning or reading for detail. What kind of exercises might be suggested here? Of course, simply answering the questions. And these might be the questions in the book. These might be your self-made questions or the questions which the students have written at warm-up stage. Then, true, false, no information. Complete the sentences. What do these numbers or these names stand for in the text? Order the events. Mind you, ordering the pictures is for general understanding. Ordering the events is for detail. Who said blah, 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 blah? Find mistakes in the summary. Not making up the summary yet, but finding mistakes in the summary. And running race. So I think this needs some clarification. This is when the text is placed on the wall, the questions are on the student's desk, or vice versa. If the text is in the book, so the students have it in the book on their desk, and the questions are on the wall. One student runs up to the wall, reads either the question, and runs up back to the desk to tell the first student the question and ask, find the answer together. Or vice versa, they have the question and then one student runs up to the text to find the answer Yeah? So this is very good for young learners who need more physical activity during the lesson. This is very nice idea to add some variety, and this might be extremely beneficial for students with attention deficiencies. So the main idea here is to teach your students to focus on sentences, not separate words. This way you avoid the notorious situation when your student can translate every word but still doesn't understand the meaning of the whole sentence. So then you move on to post reading. So what activities must be here? Asking questions based on the text and exchange them. This might be done in pairs. Say, set time limit to write the questions, then exchange them and answer. Or in groups. Now, like group one of your students ask the questions, group 2 and 3 try to answer. Yeah? Then fill in the table with the information from the text, like transferring the information into different format, yeah? Text into table. Fill in the gaps in the text or in the summary. Role play and act out and retell. Again, I think the latter needs some clarification. What it implies is that one pair shows mimes the episode of text silently. The others have to guess which episode is it and recall what happened there. Now, let's move on to the question which lots of teachers are interested in, and that is one about summary. A lot of teachers love summaries. I do too, but I'm strongly convinced they need to be done in totally different way than they usually are done. First of all, never ever allow your students to learn by heart. Yes, sometimes learning the texts by heart might be beneficial to a certain extent in terms of expanding vocabulary. But this is not summary. This is learning by heart. Yeah? So have them change the sentences. You'll rightfully ask, what if I wanted them to use certain target vocabulary which they hopefully have received from this text? To encourage them, use these new words, make a list of target vocabulary you want them to use, and have them tick every word they have used. Yeah? It's also a good idea to have them write summaries. Especially interesting is to make these summaries in tweets, which means in very, very short limit of words. Like, for instance, 150 symbols. Yeah? It's also an interesting idea to write summaries of each paragraph, say in pairs or in groups. Yeah, your pair writes a summary of paragraph 1. Your pair writes a summary of paragraph 2, etc. Yeah, and then order them to make up the summary of the whole text. Yeah. Another nice idea is the following. If you have a recording, then you start a recording at random place, or you just read one or no more than 2 sentences from the text. Then you stop the recording after a few seconds, or you stop reading after a couple of sentences, and have your students say what happened before or after these sentence or these 2 sentences. Again, in their own words. You might organize it as a competition in teams. Yeah, which team remembers more details. So, another debatable question is reading aloud. First things first, to read or not to read. Mind you that while reading aloud, we mainly and virtually exclusively improve pronunciation, hardly anything else. To improve and test reading comprehension, you need to read silently in your own pace. But I'm not totally against reading aloud, no. It's a great activity with lower levels. It's an absolutely necessary when you prepare for Russian state exams, because both 9 and 11 grade state exams test reading aloud. That's why you need to improve it. But it should be done after you have worked with the text silently and have fully understand it. So to make your reading aloud more engaging, what can you do? Shadowing. Like if you've got a recording of this text, then make your students shadow. Probably make them practice shadowing at home, and next lesson, ask them to shadow in class so that there's no difference in speed, intonation, etc. between the student and the recording. Don't ask them to shadow the whole text, only one paragraph. Again, you might separate your students into groups and ask each group to shadow one separate paragraph. Then, it might be interesting and competitive to read until you make a mistake. So you nominate someone to read. This student reads until he or she makes a mistake. Either you stop when that's the mistake, or maybe even better, you have class to listen carefully and clap their hand when they hear a mistake. Any student correct the mistake they hear, and then this student, having corrected the mistake, either continues reading or nominate who they would like to continue reading. So this way. And then, by the way, you might organize it as a competition, checking out in the end who in the class was able to read the longest. Dialogues, of course, are perfect to read in pairs. These might be like stable pairs, for instance, the student sitting next to you, or they start reading in pairs, then you clap hands, they stand up, find another pair, and read again for a certain time, until you clap your hands next time. Yeah. So changing the pairs. This adds some more dynamics. Yeah? And another question which we can't but mention talking about reading and working with the text is translation. Of course, it is beneficial in some situations and at some moments. Sometimes it helps save time or compare the languages, but never ever can it be the mostly used, not to mention the only instrument. It's a separate skill, and when we practice translation, we only improve translation skills. We don't improve reading, listening, speaking, or whatever. We don't improve skills. And we mustn't forget that it prevents students from thinking in English. It maintains the habit of quickly translating from Russian into English in your brain and only then speaking English. So if you still want to practice translation, you might ask your students to translate fragments in groups, yeah, and then make it up together. Or you might ask each group to translate the whole text and then compare. Yeah? Then it's an interesting idea, very interesting activity when the first pair translates, say, your text from English into Russian, passes their Russian version into another pair or small group, who have to translate that Russian text backwards into English and then compare it with the original. Not only will this comparison allow you to test how well they've translated, but it will be also very beneficial in terms of showing the difference between languages. Remember Nabokov's story with Память говори, Speak Memory, and Другие берега. Yeah? When he himself translated his own text in exactly the same way and found out that there were 3 different texts. And it might also be very interesting to correct computerized translation. So that's about all I wanted to talk to you about today. Thanks for watching up to the end. Until next time, take care. Goodbye.